Our intention with this panel is to help you understand the difference between internal and external coaching, and to see how organizations are using the great value that coaching has to offer, and where maybe organizations have the opportunity to continue to grow. And while you're listening to our panelists to answer these questions, I'd love for you to be thinking about where you work, or the organizations that you're a part of, that you think that coaching could really help impact, because this is an area that I think coaching is going to actually expand very quickly. And through the ICF, the International Coaching Federation's research, it is starting to really gain traction, not only at the executive levels, but organizations are actually starting to provide coaching for their employees. And so it is a great opportunity to really think about how you can encourage your management or in your organization to maybe bring this in. So thank you to our panelists. We have Annalisa, if you can unmute and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the organization that you work with.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Annalisa Teixeira, and I work at UC Davis Health. I'm a coach working out of graduate medical education. So I'm working with our medical residents and fellows, physicians in training.
Wonderful. And Valerie, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself and share with us who you work with.
Absolutely. So Valerie Woods, I am a certified executive coach working with Chevron. Chevron's a global company, so I have worked in Canada, Kazakhstan, and now currently working in London. And so it's oil and gas, and but the coaching falls under the HR umbrella, so working with leaders and teams in the organization.
Fantastic. And Lynette, now I know that you work independently now, but have worked in an organization before. So why don't you tell us about who you've worked with before, and then what you're doing now?
Yes, hi. My name is Lynette Gutnick, and I also have a background in healthcare, as we have a UC Davis partner as well, but two primary large organizations, Dignity Health as well as Sutter Health, and recently came from both environments around internal coaching. So I'm delighted to be here today to provide that perspective. Just starting out, when I did start a long time ago in internal coaching in one organization, and how that has evolved.
Fantastic. So we'll have a lot of different ways to see and how it's evolved over time, because this is something that is, while it's not new in some industries, and healthcare seems to be one who's taken, led the way in bringing coaching in, but seeing how it's evolving and where it has yet to grow. So excited to hear about that.
And just to jump in, I actually started my coaching while I was with a healthcare organization in Western Canada. So that's where it began.
That's where it began, yeah. And now it's nice to see that other organizations are starting to see its value. And I love that research is backing up why they should be doing that. So I would love to hear, Valerie, why don't you start? Describe what your organization is doing and how it relates to coaching.
Wow. So the organization compared to healthcare is definitely slower on the uptake. When I started 8 years ago, they were looking at developing a coaching program, but the economy changed, and so the coaching program was put aside. So we're really in the early stages. They started it last year. It's really starting to pick up momentum. We have very few internal coaches. I'm one of them, but the need for coaching has risen so quickly, and in fact, it's now one of the sort of the 5 leadership skills that we're really trying to develop in the organization, both in terms of providing coaching and also teaching leaders how to coach other people. So we have coaches internal. We also partner with a company called Better Up, and we're using Better Up to help democratize the coaching. So we're making it available beyond just the senior leadership level. And it's available right down to frontline supervisors all across the globe. And it's also offered in different languages, which is really helpful. And then we also work with some executive coaches who've been working with Chevron for quite a long time. providing that executive level coaching for sort of our C-suite and senior leaders in the organization. Some of the other things that we're doing, so we've just embarked on exploring the options of team coaching, starting to do a bit of team coaching from the certified coaches who are internal, but also looking at, how do we develop our coaches? How do we create the awareness of team coaching? And how do we really work on leveraging the benefits of team coaching for the betterment of the team and, again, the company? So that's just a few of the things that are going on.
Yeah, fantastic. It sounds like they're expanding. While it's new, it sounds like they're expanding pretty rapidly, which is fantastic to hear. Yeah.
When Chevron decides to do something, they do it big and they do it fast.
That's awesome. All right, Annalisa, tell us about what your organization is doing in relation to coaching.
Well, I would share the type of coaching that I'm offering in my role as an example where coaching isn't just provided to top leadership. And so, graduate medical education, wanting to extend resources to their physicians in training, this is a newer position. And so I'm able to come in and support physicians in this point of their professional development, help them be successful. So I feel really grateful that this position was part of the vision of our dean in graduate medical ed to extend these sorts of resources to folks that are just in this point of their training. And I think it speaks to the larger culture around coaching in healthcare that you come down to this level of residents and fellows, and they have a certified coach available to them. So it's really encouraging to see the coaching cultures that exist in different healthcare systems at various levels of these institutions.
Yeah, very neat. And I like too thinking about how that they're looking at the beginning stages, right? And the fellows and the residents, is that in that time, it can be really, really challenging, and making sure they have that support, I'm sure, has a big impact on the trajectory of their career. So fantastic.
Yeah, developing our physicians of the future, our attendings of the future. And so, I can work with chief residents on leadership coaching, other areas like productivity, communication coaching. So they have some options there in support of their development across distinct areas. And I hope that if they're experiencing coaching as residents and fellows, and they go on to become attendings at different institutions, different healthcare systems, that they show up and they go, where's the coaching? Right? That they have had this experience, they know the value of coaching, that I'm helping educate that, perhaps, that when they go on to the next role, that they're looking for that support. And if there isn't an internal coach available to them as physician leaders, as physicians, that maybe asking those questions, the coaching culture continues to grow in healthcare.
Yeah, I love that by experiencing it, it increases the likelihood that it'll expand within the organization. Yeah. Now, Lynette, tell us about the organizations that you've worked with and how they approach coaching.
Yes, I would say that one of the things I can share is most recently in the healthcare world, we talk about different types of coaching. And one of the examples is lean coaching, or lean method approach in terms of lean methodology. Lean methodology is based on a model produced by Toyota. And some of the work that I did in terms of our internal infrastructure was to work with frontline leaders to senior executives. So all levels of that environment, to be able to provide them not only the training and support around lean methodology, but in addition to that, be able to be their coach and help them advance and move forward. And then ultimately develop those leaders to be developing their leaders. So that's one aspect of it. And what I do have to say is that there's just a little bit of story to share here, is that when I started in coaching, I was trained in it. I was specifically wanted to be able to learn about the business aspect of that, the business track of coaching, and how might I apply that. And one of the things that I found myself, I had a wonderful opportunity in an organization to be able to share my experience and how might I develop an internal coaching program. And so I went to work with what I knew and be able to present that to our senior executives to understand the benefits that you would see with coaching. And so there's that started a while back and evolved. And then how you can look at different styles of types of coaching that we do within the environment of being able to identify and gain efficiencies that add value to our organization and our customers.
Very nice. Yeah, it's so interesting how this can grow and shift and change, and that being a coach, you can have the ability to impact its ability to grow. So presenting, and creating an internal coaching system. Now,
well, I also think,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to share is that our responsibility as coaches is to educate and understanding the world of coaching, the field of coaching, and what value and benefit that adds. And I think that that's a huge opportunity to provide that knowledge so that appropriate decisions can be made.
Very nice. Now, Lynette, you can continue with this. How does someone get chosen for coaching? How are the people chosen for in your organization or in your experience that receive that?
Well, I think there's two components that we look at is in terms of the relationship building with people and that background environment. One of them is if you have an environment such as a healthcare, it's a wonderful addition to the field or industry that you're in, because it can be able to relate to individuals and understanding their world. So that is a plus or benefit. So if you're in an industry and know that industry well, then you have the ability to be able to relate to individuals in terms of understanding their world. So I think there's one benefit. How are people chosen? Again, I would say that one of the things that we look at is the ability to be able to build relationship with individuals, the types of communication style, their experience with managing teams, developing teams, developing people. Those are other components of that. Ability to want to be learned and open and understanding and being transparent and open to developing themselves. And then also the ability to, as I said, develop those relationships with individuals, and whether that's influencing the strategic direction of an organization, all of those components, and having that variety or those different types of perspective are certainly beneficial.
Nice. So really what stuck out in my mind was that relationship building, and that if someone is challenged in that seems to be a wonderful time and an opportunity to bring coaching in to help them develop that skill. Very nice. Mm-hmm. Now, Annalisa, tell us about how your organization chooses who receives coaching.
Well, in my role, any resident or fellow in theory has access to me, depending on what my calendar looks like. So that's exciting. It also means, creating a culture around being resourceful, right? Choosing to use coaching as a savviness, as a sign of strength. So that's part of the educating of what coaching is, right? Because at the same time, and this isn't unique to my role, it's unique to internal coaching, is you do have those cases where folks are identified as needing coaching. I'm curious to hear, Valerie and Lynette, what your experiences have been, right? Where there is, potentially a stigma in being connected with a coach. So I'm seeing folks kind of in both respects. I'm having folks self-identify and they are choosing to be coached. They're excited about being coached. And I'm also connecting with clients who are being referred to me. And so trust building is huge there, right? Educating what coaching is to really help them see the benefit and buy in and do so genuinely. And so I know there's, topics we could explore further about, making sure these conversations are private, that the client knows exactly what doesn't leave the space. And so they feel they have that psychological safety to use the coaching resource, even if it was through a referral, for their growth. And that I can express authentically and genuinely, I'm here for your success. The referral may have come in how it's come in, but I'm here to work with you on how you want to show up in your role, what you want out of, managing a professional identity and managing your performance and demonstrating your values as a physician. I'm here to work with you on how you want to grow. So I'm seeing folks kind of coming to me from both those angles. Anyone has access to me, and then sometimes it's through referral.
Okay, wonderful. And Valerie, how does that work with Chevron?
It's interesting. So rather than repeating a lot of what both Lynette and Annalisa have said, you know, a lot of similarities. I know it because Chevron's gone through this sort of evolution in terms of coaching. Interesting. My role as an internal coach and leadership consultant has continued through the past 8 years, despite many of those positions disappearing. And so I think the part of the challenge has been, to Annalisa's point, it's trying to educate the environment, trying to educate leaders in the organization. What is coaching? Because there is a perception, and there is still a perception that coaching is related to remedial effort, right? Coaching is it's the last stop before the dismissal. And I know that even in the efforts of trying to educate the organization and the leaders, oftentimes, you know, you deliver the coaching because it's expected of you. And so there would be those referrals from various leaders. And usually they would be frontline supervisors or people that were identified originally as high potentials, and then something happened along the way. So that's always been a challenge. In terms of, you know, how were people identified for coaching, prior to this new shift to bring coaching, really bring it into the organization and elevate in terms of the availability in the programs. I think I was one of less than a handful of coaches that were available in the enterprise. And oftentimes it was, in fact, it was really hard to get people to want to do coaching. And so part of my role was also consulting, and I would go in and I would do the consulting. But as a coach, you're not just doing coaching, you're always a coach. Coaching becomes part of who you are and what you do. And so I would blend a little bit of coaching in the process. And oftentimes leaders would come back and say, well, that was really powerful. I don't know what you did, but that was really powerful. And so through the referral system, more and more leaders would start to ask for it. They called it consulting. And I would slowly educate them. So it was kind of finessing the system a little bit. Most of the time it was just leaders that I was working with from a developmental perspective. And that's just continued to grow to the point where I think there's a senior leader somewhere that had coaching in the past 2 years, and it was such a profound experience for them that coaching has now landed as one of our top priorities. And so this is why the program's starting to grow. So yay, it doesn't matter to me how it happened. I'm just really glad that we're starting to grow that.
Yeah, getting the right people involved and engaged in that, knowing the value of coaching.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Valerie, could you talk to the confidentiality? Oh, did you want to add something, Lynette, before we move on? Oh.
No, I'm good. There's just what I would add is there's a couple things. When people come to you to say, I need you to help coach this individual. You talk about, what is it that you want to change or what's not happening. And then I would say that we need to think about I've used with individuals is I might be good, but I want to go to great. So there's an opportunity that they want to aspire for something more. And is how we position ourselves to say, how do we keep our long-term, how do we keep retaining our individual people, and how do we help them promote themselves?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That retention and development. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So sorry, Katie, what was the question? It was about confidentiality?
On confidentiality. How does that work within an organization? I'm an external coach, so I know everything stays in our little protected session. Tell me about how that works in an organization.
Well, and that's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm hoping there's a bit of a delay in the system here, so I'll apologize if I'm suddenly doing the squirrel on the screen. The thing is that if you're a certified coach, and I mean, affiliated with organizations such as the International Coach Federation, there is a personal commitment. There's a professional commitment to a code of ethics, right? And standards to confidentiality. And so that's embedded in me as a coach as part of my professional practice. So it really depends on the coach. Now, I can only speak for myself. I cannot speak for anyone else because there were very few coaches in the organization. I can tell you that I have been challenged. I can tell you I've had presidents come to me and say, I want to know what was talked about in that conversation. And my response, and this is a really squishy, uncomfortable place to be, but my response has been, I abide by the code of ethics of confidentiality. I would expect you to do the same in your profession. And so I cannot tell you, and if that means you need to fire me, then so be it. And there's often this sort of look of shock from them, right? But I had to stand by that. And to the extent, and again, it's all personal. I had a locked cabinet. I would take just occasional notes just because there were, several hundred people that I was coaching when I was with the Canadian business unit. And I had all of their information locked. And I went through a cycle of making sure that I purged that information. The information was genericized as much as possible. So there weren't names, there were codes that were actually used on the files. So I really wanted to make sure that people were not only aware of the confidentiality that I committed to, they could see it in my office. And that went a long way, I think, to building trust, particularly for the folks who were sent in for the remedial coaching. And by the way, I've only ever had one person who was let go after that. The rest of them have gone on and are still with the organization in leadership roles.
Wonderful. I'd love to hear, Annalisa, how does that work in your organization with the confidentiality?
Yeah, again, it's part of educating what coaching is, and the reasons why keeping things confidential are important, right? About, if I'm going to really help someone move themselves forward, they have to feel safe about what they're sharing, that it's not going to be shared in a way that wouldn't make them feel great, particularly in those cases where referral has occurred, right? And so for me, it's educating from the start if a referral comes that I'm happy to work with this individual. What background can you give me about the situation that will help me understand the context, and then clarifying that what's said in the coaching sessions is private. If you're interested on what the individual is working on, you'll have to ask them. I won't speak for the client. And in some cases, it's well-meaning. I won't say it's always like, I want to hear what the client is divulging, right? Sometimes it's like, how is it going? Are they doing better? Are they doing okay? And even then, right, I hold myself to those ethics, and yeah, why don't you ask the individual what they're getting out of it? I think that would be a good conversation for you both to have. I really commit to that privacy. Personally, I don't capture a lot in my sessions. A technique I like to use is, as we end a session, I say, okay, what questions could I ask you next time to help move you forward? And is it okay if I capture that for the two of us? And then it is shared between the two of us. So anything I capture is their words, and they see what I've captured, and those notes are private to the both of us. So there's techniques I use to try to demonstrate my values around privacy, that anytime I'm meeting someone for the first time for a coaching engagement, I'm clarifying from the start, this is a private conversation. It's in my materials as they, look to sign up, that it's written, right? They can reference it. And yeah, it's absolutely crucial. It really is. And in my role, they have resources, through mental health, where confidentiality, it's HIPAA protected. And so part of educating what coaching is how coaching is distinct in some cases too, right? But there's an expectation that these conversations need to be private, right? Coaching or therapy, that this is how we help people feel safe, and we help people work on themselves.
Yeah. I like too how you, I'll go to you in just a second, Lynette, that you specify with the referrer, the person who's referring, that you're saying that in the beginning. And then if they ask, that you're actually encouraging them to have the conversation with them. I think that that's really poignant. Yeah. Lynette, tell us about your experience with confidentiality.
Well, I think a lot has been shared already. What I would add is that one of the things that I have learned is that when you're an internal coach, the perception of others that you're coaching is that you are part of them. So the coach's role is to continue to emphasize that confidentiality piece. What I have found is that you might say that at the beginning and talk about confidentiality, but along the way, as things begin to progress or unfold and the information is shared, the continuing support of, remember, this won't go anywhere. This is between me and that I find that has to be iterated again and again. And I don't care if you're in 2 weeks into it, 3 months into it, it's reassuring them that it does not go anywhere. So that perception is there. And I believe that we have a role that, for me, that has been one of the beneficial tips that has been helpful for me to help move that client forward, is creating that safe environment by saying things like, as a reminder, and especially when they're ready to share something that they really don't know what they're going to do with that. And those words will help them in terms of their support so that we can get to a place of helping them move forward. And I found, so anyway, that's one thing I would add as well.
Yeah, that you kind of wait to see how they're feeling, assessing, and reminding them of the confidentiality when you can tell that there's some apprehension or they may be holding back.
Yes.
Keeping them into it. So what are some of the challenges that you've experienced, Lynette, while doing internal coaching?
A couple things come to mind, and I think that Valerie mentioned that as well, where that confidentiality line lies, and being able to make sure that we adhere to the ethics and standards about not sharing anything about our clients, and really standing up for who we are. And if that is a difficult conversation, so be it. That's what has to happen. And as far as the coaching, one of the things I would say is one of the biggest challenges is the multi-priorities that are happening with the client, demands that they have on their day-to-day, and the focus and the commitment around that. Obviously, those are things that we talk about up front, but as life evolves and things go along, those challenges of the multiple and pressing priorities, and then the willingness to be able to willingness to commit and participate. So those kind of conversations have to loop back around again and again, and to make sure that that this is a commitment by the individual. It doesn't need to be a commitment by the individual. So I would say that those are probably one of the two key areas of challenges that I face.
Very good. How about you, Annalisa? What does it look like? What are some challenges you've faced with internal coaching?
Yeah, I think very similar to what Lynette just shared is, those cases of referral, right? Trying to use different tools to make them feel safe, to work with roll. I like the term roll with the resistance. But I have to say that a challenge like that is also really gratifying. Those cases where someone shows up, they're ready to coach, they're excited. But those cases where someone came with some resistance and you were able to roll with that, and at the end they go, this actually was really, really good. It's funny how they can qualify it a little bit, right? This is actually really good. Those are huge wins for me. So I point that out as a challenge, but it's also a huge point of fulfillment. Ending up being a resource to someone who wasn't quite sure about it at the start feels really good.
Shifting that perspective and helping them open to it. Yeah. And Valerie, I know if you don't have to repeat the same things, do you have any other things to add that you found challenging?
Absolutely. And so I'm actually using my coaching technique, and I tell my clients that I think my brain is just getting older There's so much more information in it that I need to write down keywords so that I can remember them after. So just to add to some of the things, I mean, we've talked about coaching being seen as remedial. We've also talked about defining coaching because it means so many things. Coaching in our organization and even within a learning and development construct is still misunderstood as telling people what to do, as advising, right? So that's actually a challenge, because if people come to me for coaching, they think I'm going to solve the problem for them. And I have to be very cautious not to go into the teach about the difference between coaching and consulting, but try and softly educate while I support them through a consultative approach. But I always weave in coaching and then help them understand the difference. Some of the other things that are different from what the other ladies have talked about, and that is, two things come to mind. One of them is a lot of our organization is highly technical, right? I remember working in healthcare, and while you're working with clinically technical people, they still work with other human beings. So I don't know, it was easier to relate to them. I've worked with highly technical people, and this is a broad generalization. This is not everyone, but a lot of the sort of the scientific minded, technical minded folks, they need an algorithm. They want to understand what's really going on. And the behavioral sciences, which is what we're in, they don't understand that there's a science. So that sometimes creates some challenges in terms of building credibility for people to get into the process and see value. Once they're in it, they see value, but seeing value and getting buy-in before they come in is sometimes a challenge. I would say the biggest challenge in internal coaching is ego. The ego of leaders. And what's that saying? That the leader who seeks coaching usually doesn't need it, and the leader who doesn't seek coaching needs it the most. I've had experiences with senior executives, and these are people running multi-billion-dollar international projects, who laugh when I introduce myself and tell them, I'm there to support them if they're interested in a coaching conversation, blah blah blah. And they'll just say, what do you know about my job? Till you walked a mile in my shoes, how dare you come in here and tell me how to do my job? It's like, okay, so clearly there's a misunderstanding. That's an extreme example of it. But even in a coaching conversation, I have worked with other senior leaders, COOs and chief human resource officers. And my role as an internal is to have no position, they have no position. I need to be able to have a coaching conversation with them regardless of hierarchical structure. And so I'll challenge them like a coach should do. And I always do it very carefully and very respectfully, but you push them a little bit, right? And I have had that come back and bite me, because that person talks to my supervisor, who comes to me and says, how dare you talk to the to the senior leader like that? So, there are little things that you just have to watch for. What that tells me is there's a culture of, reframe. There's an opportunity to shift that leadership culture, but sometimes you're out of the gate and it happens before you can reel it back in. So you just live and learn.
Now that hierarchical thing sounds like it could be quite tricky.
I've coached leaders who have actually said to me, remember, I'm the person that does your PMP, or I'm the person that cuts your check. And it's like, okay, changes the conversation. Yeah.
You earn the respect along the way. They're going to test you. You're going to put it out there, see what sticks, and then come around. And, you earn it. You work it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that humor goes a long way. Again, I don't do, okay, I see you've got a big title. I respect, what you've done and what you've accomplished. I'm here doing my job to support you and help bring out the best in you. And if the best is there, cool. How do we polish that and shine it up just a little bit? Or how do we help you sustain that best of the best? I'm not there to upset them in any way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wonderful. So tell me about how your organizations measure the success or the effectiveness of coaching. Lynette, you want to jump in first?
Sure. I think one of the most important questions you have to ask if we were to say is, how do we measure success? What is it that's changed? What is the change that we want to see? And how will we know that change has been effective? So how might we measure that success? So I think that's one out of the gate conversation, is about what is it that we're actually trying to get to. And, I just kind of summarized, you can think about specific outcomes that we want to be able to achieve, whether those things are perhaps service oriented, financial oriented, quality oriented, customer satisfaction, employee oriented. Those are kind of the larger outcomes that we want to achieve or want to look at. And then we ask, well, then how would we know? So we have to look at some more specific details. And the other component for that is to say, how might we measure behavior? So if we think of ways that we can measure behavior, whether that's through an assessment, there's various assessments out there that we can look at to be able to get a baseline. Whether that is through, we've got team dynamic team coaching, or whether that's individual coaching. How is the team measuring? How do we measure our team success right now? And the environment and the mindsets and the perceptions and the behaviors. And then how might we look at that after that type of work is being done? I also would add, in addition to that, as we look at measuring leadership development takes time. So it's not necessarily something you see immediate. And I think that's one of the components that our responsibility as coaches is to be able to communicate that and then be able to partner on what that looks like. So a couple things. One, the behaviors and those various tools, as well as the outcomes. What is it they want to see that we're not getting, and how will we know, and how might we measure that? So those are a couple things. I'll leave it at that and have a couple other people share.
Fantastic. Annalisa, tell us about what it looks like. How do you measure the impact and the value of coaching in your organization?
Yeah, some similarities there with Lynette talking about behavior. Residents being in training, there's a lot of evaluation that happens. And so, there are opportunities to see growth over time, but, Lynette's point about development taking time is huge here with assessment. So I'll echo that. And then something that's a little harder to measure, because it's not at the individual level, is the shift in culture that coaching exists, right? You can look, this is maybe something relevant more so to something outside of something so niche as residency training, but staff retention, something more aggregate, something more institutional, maybe a place to start looking at that. But I find that it's kind of challenging to quantify. How has it shifted the culture around support, around resources, the quality of experience, that just this resource exists for folks? How do we capture that? Maybe in exit interviews as they leave residency. So I guess I'll share that this is a newer position too. So I don't have all the answers here. These are some questions that I'm playing with. But I'd love to think of it, on those different levels, individual, team, but also just the culture, the fact that coaching's available. How does that impact experiences culturally? And then, leadership to individual contributor. How are we all benefiting in our own ways?
Fantastic. Wonderful. And Valerie, what does Chevron do to measure the outcomes and the impact?
Yeah, again, we're in fairly early days. These are things that we're looking at doing. What I can tell you is that some of our vendor partners, BetterUp, for example, is they do a post-assessment after every, like it's a electronic post-assessment after every engagement. And it's subjective, right? They ask the same questions over and over again. Some of them are Likert, on a scale of 1 to 5. Some of them are open. And they then aggregate that information and they feed that back to the company, at least related to the coaching that's provided by BetterUp. I know that, part of the challenge of measuring coaching is, as you said, it happens over time. Leadership development of anyone through the coaching process happens over time, some faster than others. And so the challenge with that is that there are other confounding factors that can play into also influencing the climate or the culture of an organization. One of the things that we've started doing, early days, not sure how well it's going to work, but so far so good. We used to do an employee survey roughly every 2 to 3 years. They started doing that a little more frequently over the past few years. And then when we thought they were going to change it back to every 2 or 3 years, they actually increased it. We do one a quarter. The questions have changed in there. And in those questions, we're looking for some of those behavioral indicators in terms of engagement, empowerment, satisfaction, and also doing some level of question assessment on the leaders and supervisors. You know, does your supervisor build trust in the team? And then they measure that on a Likert scale. So there are some other measures and data that we can gather. But for the most part, like I say, we're still building it, requesting feedback after coaching sessions, and we'll continue to develop something. So if any of you have any great suggestions, I'm all ears. Send them my way.
Nice. And Lynette, how has measurement been in your experience? Oh wait, I already asked you that. You
Yeah,
answered
you
that
did.
one, right? Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
I started with you. Okay. Well, as we wrap this up, I'd love to hear your advice or what you think that organizations really have to gain by bringing coaching in to their process. Since I called you, can go, Lynette. I called you first.
Yeah. What is the value that coaching brings to an internal environment? That's pretty much what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of things that I would share, as I shared at the beginning, and that is we have great people who work in organizations. No one comes in an organization to do a bad job. Something happens along the way. And the ability to continue to provide that support to help that individual direct themselves through the course of their development direction is important. And something happens along the way. And so who has the time to be able to stop and develop that individual in a particular situation that they're either stuck and they've lacked their motivation, there's no drive. How do we do that? And so I think as internal coaches, we have an opportunity to be able to hold that space for an individual. At the same time, the ability to be able to get the results that an organization wants, that we're able to partner with them, there's a benefit and value to that. As I mentioned, we have individuals that are good, but we want to make them great. So I think, as Valerie mentioned earlier, as a coach, how can we help polish that to be able to advance them within the organization or the company? One of the things that comes to mind is that when I think about that advancement, you know, within Toyota, the way that individuals are promoted within their company is the number of leaders, the number of people that the leaders promote within their group. So that's a very powerful statement. So as coaches, we have the ability to transfer these types of skills to our leaders so that they have the ability to grow their leaders. And sometimes that skill set is something that they need as well. The value, I know that we all have built-in accountabilities, but to have that accountability and partner as a coach is a tremendous value if we're able to see that, have that client be able to move forward. And I would also say that, yes, we are internal, but we also have the ability to have an objective view. Rather being internal and in terms of within an environment day to day, if we're not in that environment that our couple panels are on, we have that objective, and which obviously helps to benefit the client as well.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Annalisa, what would you say if you were going to try and sell coaching? What is a value that you think an organization should really hear and know about?
And if I could go at it from a slightly different angle, I would just point out that I've collected examples of folks that have reinvented their position to be a coaching position. The one that I find myself in, it wasn't strictly a coaching position. I saw an opportunity to make a position like director of resident development, make that a coaching position. And so I see these as opportunities to come in different roles, whether it's HR, training and development, right? And and create jobs that are coaching positions, because then you're not just speaking about the value of coaching, you're demonstrating it, right? What opportunity have I had to educate on what coaching is and help grow a coaching culture by coming in and already being a coach, right? I didn't have to come from the outside saying, hey, what would it look like if residents had a coach? So I would just encourage folks that are looking to perhaps, transition into internal coaching, or if we have the shared mission to grow the presence of internal coaches, just challenging ourselves to not wait for the position that is a coaching position, but coach where we're at, see opportunities to make positions coaching positions, and grow it in that way. So coming from it, both from verbalizing the value and influencing how we can, and then coaching where we're already at, and creating those opportunities.
Fantastic. I love that. And Valerie, what would you say to an organization? How would you approach that question?
The elevator speech, the big, hairy, audacious question. I'm just gonna answer it with a simple response. We all know there's tons of research that says that good leaders inspire people. They bring out the best in people, right? That translates to higher discretionary performance. Engaged employees, happier employees, want to contribute more to the organization. Happy, engaged, high-performing employees, that impacts the bottom line in terms of, profits, safety, managing expenses. And so really coaching helps develop the leaders, brings out the best in the leaders, so that you can go full circle and help them bring out the best of the people. Coaching helps bring out the best in everyone.
I love that. Oh, that's a wonderful one to end on too. Coaching does bring out the best in everyone. And I want to thank the three of you for coming and sharing this perspective. I've taken away a lot, and I understand so much more about what's happening inside organizations and how this works. So thank you for sharing your expertise and your experience with us. I really appreciate it. And I hope that everyone listening has heard more about what it is and how you might not even need to wait for that internal coaching position or an internal coach, is that you can develop these skills and bring them in and start to show the value to the organization through your own behavior and your own actions.